All right. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Navigating Now virtual roundtable series. This is episode 37 of our roundtable series. We go live each week with leaders in business talking about the topics that matter most to us as business professionals. And we've got another great guest here today. But before we dive in, we'll cover off on a few housekeeping items. First and foremost, we want to thank everybody for joining from all of our communities. We just love the eyes that are put on our content, particularly the light that is shined on so many great leaders that step into this discussion with us. And we've got an incredible leader today. We want to thank those folks who have joined us via Zoom. Those who have registered are free to ask questions. You can do so by posting those questions in chat. We also want to welcome our LinkedIn community. We get a lot of great feedback and interaction over LinkedIn. So those folks who are stopping by, please feel free to say hello in comments. We broadcast every Thursday to LinkedIn Live, 3 p.m. Central. We also would like to thank and welcome our Facebook and YouTube community as well too. So thank you everybody for joining, for stopping by, and maybe even if you're watching this a few days from now, we hope that you really enjoy the content and interact with us. With that being said, again, we're 37 weeks into the Navigating Now Roundtable series. Each episode brings a new leader to the table. We've been talking a lot about community recently. And we have not only a leader in business, but a leader in community today in Brian Helfrich. Brian is the CEO of Summit Coffee. Summit Coffee is more than just a coffee company. It is a brand and a lifestyle. And Brian's doing some incredible things to bring that brand to not only the community, but just the broader population. And he's going to talk to us today a little bit about scaling community and what that's looked like for him locally in North Carolina, what that looks like for his organization as they start to grow. And Brian, we couldn't be happier to have you at the table. And more importantly, thank you for joining and welcome to the Navigating Now community.
Thank you, Anthony. This is exciting. So 37 weeks is a lot of weeks you've been doing this.
It has been, and it has, you know, and time is always relative. I mean, we've really felt like this last year has gone so quickly. But when we zoom out, I mean, we're just so proud of being able to show up for our community on a weekly basis, and that's only made by folks like yourself who show a bit of the creative confidence of stepping into a conversation with us. So again, thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So Brian, I want to dive right in as we always do. The topic of community has been loud and clear over the last couple months as we're all kind of making our way through and navigating these times. What does community mean to you, and how has that maybe changed over the course of the last year?
That's a great question. Community is a buzzword, right, that everyone uses, and to me, it is a collection of people that you choose to associate with. And so as an individual, that's a community of your neighbors. As a business, that includes the vendors that you work with and the partners. And I think community is a collection of people that are coming together and can work together to achieve something. And in terms of how that's changed over the last 12 months, I think that what COVID has done and, issues of social unrest in the last year, it's made me lean harder into my community to sort of survey who my community is and how we can lean on each other, both as like a giver and a taker.
And so would you say that your community has gotten tighter over the last year, or would you say that your community and maybe the Summit community has expanded, or maybe even both?
I would say that our community has gotten tighter in the idea that I believe we've leaned more into relationship building. I think that we've sort of cut out some of the fluff on the side of the business, and you've leaned into your community of your employees, of your communities that you're serving from a coffee shop standpoint, and even our coffee farmer communities. I think we've just really gotten to the core of those relationships. So I think they've all gotten tighter, our various communities.
Yeah, it is a really interesting dichotomy, if you will, in that, I've talked a lot about our 6-block radius. That's almost been kind of a term that we use within our team. And that is that in these times, our eyes have been open to the community that has always maybe existed right in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
And for us as traveling consultants, that means just geographically, we've been more in one place, whether that's you feel like you've been more confined to home, or for me, that means I've really just had to kind of make my 6-block radius more of my life over the course of the last year, because I'm not at the airport, every other week.
Mm-hmm.
And my eyes have been open to a lot of community that has always existed there. And a big part of this dialogue has come from unearthing that community that maybe you haven't drawn a direct link to, but because we're living in a world today where our 6-block radius might be the only geography that we have, you not only get creative, but you realize how easy it is to connect with other folks that maybe don't share the same business as you, or other folks that you wouldn't have run into in your 6-block walk every day. And I'm sure that that's even impacting the way that your shops are strategizing and running their business. And I want to get into that in a second, but maybe just thoughts on the 6-block radius concept.
Yeah, I think you're exactly right. I think you spoke to how easy it is, but also how important and powerful it is. I think that people, you walk by other shops and you walk by, the deli and even your neighbors. And when you're always on the go somewhere, whether you're traveling, you're at airports, you're going somewhere, it's easy to bypass a lot of things that are between here and there. And I think the last year has given me more time to be between here and there.
I love that. Okay, so tell us about Summit, because I feel like we owe that introduction, because Summit is much more than just coffee and coffee shops. So tell us about Summit and where you're at today.
Yeah, Summit is a 22-year-old company that operates like a startup. It is functionally, we have 6 cafes. We import and roast our own coffee, and we are a growing lifestyle brand that is opening franchise cafes currently all around North Carolina. So we have a lot of different things that we balance. We're a coffee wholesaler, and we are growing really quickly. We had ambitious growth plans prior to COVID and what 2020 did to all these businesses, but we found ways to stay on that growth trajectory, and we've doubled our staff size and doubled our revenue in the last 12 months despite. And so while we have 6 cafes and 70 employees, we have ambitions to be at 60 cafes in the next 4 years, and all the opportunities that could provide us and for the people who work with Summit.
Yeah, that's incredible. So you took the lead at Summit when, and tell us a little bit about kind of what you stepped into and what was your original vision for Summit.
Yeah, it's a great story. I worked at Summit as a college student, as a barista when I went to Davidson College. Summit Coffee has been in my family for 18 years. My older brother bought it and ran a single coffee shop in Davidson, and I was a barista in college. And then fast forward a few years, I was a professional, and my brother said, I really want to grow this thing. Do you have an interest in doing it with me? And so I came on board as a part owner for a year, and I think my first title was like director of business development, but functionally I was the manager of a coffee shop. And that was 2012. And since then have taken Summit to where it is, and always knew that I wanted to test myself, a little bit of intellectual curiosity, if you will. And I believe that this brand of Summit and sort of our brand of leadership, how we take care of our employees, how we develop employees, how we shift the perspective on what it means to be a barista, frankly. I think there's a stigma around service industry employees that we could all afford to re-examine. And I think being a leader in that community is something that's always been really important to me. And so we want to grow Summit in part to continue to grow our employees and continue to set a good example.
That's cool. So I want to double click maybe into the, Summit coffee shop / barista experience, because it sounds like it's fairly unique, and it sounds like, you're really focused on differentiating through that experience. So tell us about that experience, and More so, I'm interested in how your baristas are different than, say, the baristas at Starbucks.
Yeah. Well, I think compensation is an important thing, and I don't want to be nitty gritty on that. You have to pay people well, and but that's more than just their hourly pay. It's providing them opportunities for. We offer health benefits. We offer retirement, and I think retirement's a small thing, but it also sends a message that we care about your future in a way. So we take care of you now. We take care of you in the future. But the bigger thing we do is we really want our staffing model to function as an incubator of sorts. So we put a ton of emphasis on ongoing education, not coffee necessarily, but skills that people can use in any other career. And we teach leadership development courses. We teach marketing courses. Two of my business partners actually right now are in the middle of teaching at this moment, are teaching a positive psychology class to 12 baristas. And these are free to our staff. But what we're trying to do is build more well-rounded employees. And so people, even if people come in looking for a part stopover, we want them to know that while they're here, we are going to invest in their development. And it's done two things for us. One is you get more engaged employees, but two, it also breeds loyalty and trust among your employees. And we've developed so much of our leadership staff from barista level positions just by constantly investing in their learning and their development and finding those people who are curious and tapping into that.
That's incredible. I mean, that's very unique. So those are real investments that you're making in developing.
Yeah, there's not a great ROI metric for that.
Yeah, well, and I'm not going to ask about ROI, but I would like to ask about, how do you think that investment shows up for or enhances the customer experience?
I think that as Summit grows, especially for so many years, I was the frontline connection or one person removed from the daily connection with the Summit brand for all of our consumers. And I think as we grow, I interact with very few customers on a day-to-day basis, but the people that work for Summit, the people that I work with on a daily basis are our brand. And I really love Summits because it's a platform for me to be creative, to be kind, to be a leader in our communities. And so instilling those values, and that starts with hiring the right people, obviously, but getting them a sense of the bigger purpose of their job. And it's, coffee is a commodity, but we're trying to decommoditize this business. And so if you get employees who, even though they're a 22-year-old barista, they just left my leadership development class, they've got a ton of energy for, having just read a book from Simon Sinek, or, having a webinar with another leader or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating too to empower, enable your employees to understand the value in brand, right? Because I think a lot of people really just associate brand to marketing and ultimately to sales, but brand is the ethos. It's the fabric of who you are. It's the fingerprints that you leave, all over the place. I can imagine certain baristas like really getting into and understanding the impact that level of consistency in terms of the way we speak to Summit and the way, not just in our day-to-day actions, but more so in our philosophy and our ethos and our conversations, that just creates more consistency. It also enables them to have a true appreciation for the fact that they're a part of something bigger than just their job.
Yeah, and I think that last part, they're a part of it, but they're also a part of making that come to life. And I think that's something that we really constantly try to emphasize, is that you guys are part of making Summit what Summit is. Like, I can show you what our vision is. I can write our mission statement. I can develop our core values, but ultimately how you guys represent those core values into the world is what makes Summit brand. It's, I think Jeff Bezos said it, like, your brand is what people say about you when you're not in the room. And that is like every interaction that people are having with Summit right now is I'm not in the room. And I think getting employees who believe in what they're doing on a daily basis. And I think providing meeting beyond, I really like making coffee because it's cool, I think is what differentiates us. Because there's a ton of coffee shops and there's places that probably do a better job developing their coffee skills. But for us, we want people to feel like we see their whole person. And it's like, if you really care about sustainability, there's going to be a platform for you to be in a conversation about sustainability.
Yeah. Yeah. You just said the word that we've been using a lot internally with our team, and that's platform. We've actually started, within our team, we've all started to call Thoughtium a platform and not a company.
Cool.
And I like, to me, it just, that feels so good, because that takes a little bit of the focus or the control away from a few. And it really is like, hey, what we're here to do is really just build a foundation. And it's a matter of people getting on that foundation and bringing their own talents to it that will ultimately build the thing. And so for us, like, our company is more a platform than it is anything else, because we're so small, less than 10 employees.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody has such an impact on not just where we're going, but like how we're getting there. And I think we're just realizing that more and more. And so I love that you're thinking about it in those ways. What are maybe some of the ways that you've seen your team, your staff, influence the way that you do business, or the customer experience, or, an example where somebody's brought an idea to the table and it's really informed your direction?
That's a great question. I think from every aspect, from how we roast coffee to how we drink coffee to how we do marketing campaigns, I think that we've created this culture of curiosity where there's an ongoing feedback loop between sort of our leadership team and the barista staff. That's, hey, did you see this company is doing this? And just yesterday, I had a barista who shared with me Sweet Green's commitment to be carbon neutral by 2027. And it's a really inspiring thing. We're in the process of rebuilding our platform for sustainability, not to overuse that word. And so here's a barista who, spends 40 hours a week making coffee, but they probably, because we've talked enough about Sweet Green in classes, it's on their radar. They see something on Twitter about Sweet Green and they send it to me. And then we have a back and forth about what are some ideas that we can implement immediately to frame sustainability. Similarly, in 2020, a really important conversation about racial equity and social justice. Yeah. And so we had employees who were speaking up about saying, here's a brand that has questionable practices. I don't think we should serve their products in our cafe. And we have that conversation. It's a dialogue. And so you create a safe space, but then ultimately, when people understand what the brand's trying to do, they feel like they know, almost how to call us out on it. Like, it's like, you tell us that this is really important, but this doesn't align with what you're saying. And then, it's on us to, and if we ultimately were full of crap, then it would run its course. But, hopefully we respond thoughtfully enough.
I love it. Okay. We're going to totally bounce around, because there's a story that, it's not going to follow the natural progression of this conversation, because I'm just too excited to ask about it. You and I touched on it last couple of weeks as we got to know each other and each other's businesses. I want you to talk a little bit about the last 6 or 8 months and some of the things that you all have done to shift the way that you serve your community. I'm not going to say the P word, pivot, right? Because the story that you shared with me, the specific story that you shared with me, was way less about pivoting and way more about simply meeting your community in some really interesting ways. So talk to us a little bit about that specific story on how you all were able to shift and meet your community at the point of impact, if you will.
Yeah, well, and again, it ties in nicely to your 6-block rule. So I live exactly 6 blocks from our flagship cafe, and I run every morning. And so between here and there, about halfway, there's a 87 square foot vacant bank teller drive-through that has been vacant for 5 years. The town of Davidson, where we live, doesn't allow drive-through businesses, and a developer has a big sign out front of what the building's going to look like ultimately. And when COVID outbreak hit New York and we knew it was coming down to North Carolina, we were really trying to align a couple things, which is we really didn't want to lay off our staff, which was happening all over the service industry. We didn't want to let down our community, which had served us for 22 years and has always shown up for us. And we also wanted to create good news. We felt like there was an opportunity and really a need in the world to provide good news, to provide something exciting, something to look forward to. Like, again, this idea of providing joy and connectivity. We just didn't want a world or a community where that didn't exist. And so I actually walked up to the door and saw a business card in the window of the drive-through and called the number. And it was the guy who owned the parcel of land, which, and I said, can I open a coffee shop in here? And he said, the town's never going to let you do it. And I said, well, if the town says yes, will you say yes? And he said, sure. And he said, transparently, I don't even have the keys to the building. So if you get in, you'll have to hire a locksmith. So I, called the town, I got a no. I called the town, I got a no. Ultimately, and this is where you build some good capital up, is on the fourth phone call, you talk to the right person. And we got a green light on a Wednesday. It was March 18th. It was the day after St. Patrick's Day, to open a drive-through coffee shop. And we committed to opening that Saturday, having never run a drive-through before in our life. This place had no electricity, no plumbing. And so functionally, we actually just used the road of the drive-through to serve coffee that we were brewing off-site. And so we didn't do anything except pop up a table, but we branded it. We put a sign out front and we did some marketing. And on that first morning, there were, and we collaborated with a local restaurant of ours to create a donut, which they had never done. And they had just laid off their entire staff. And on that first morning, there were 90 cars in line before we opened. And none of us had ever run a drive-through business before. And it was chaos. And I actually called, this was before we thought it was an airborne disease. And so I called down the street to my neighbors, and 3 of them came running down to help us on that first day. We had 11 people scattered about trying to direct cars. And it was just a beautiful symphony of here's people coming together at a terrible time. Hey, there you go. Mm-hmm. So you can see, it's about the most unglorious branded thing we've ever done. We care so much about our brand, but at that point it became about the brand was, what are you doing for your community? Not how does it look? Yeah, there I am.
Yep. I love that. And this is you standing in front of the bank essentially, right? Is this opening day?
This was the day before. I'm not even sure we had decided. So we have our homemade wood sign. I'm not sure we'd even decided how it was going to function yet. But yes, I was, we got a couple local media reporters out there, and look, you can tell, again, I wasn't wearing a mask. If you remember in early March, people had no idea what COVID was. It was and we look stupid in hindsight, but I'm talking to a reporter from a foot away. Thankfully, none of us got sick.
I mean, this is just the epitome of figuring it out, the epitome of, what's next and how do we show up, whether we have the answers or not. And it's so great because I see even your nonverbals, your hand gestures are very much well, we just kind of threw it together and we're going to see how this goes.
Yeah,
and this is somebody taking an order.
Yeah, look, I mean, we were right. So we called our point of sale company, and we're we had never done handheld ordering before. And we're do you have handhelds? And sure enough, so this gentleman right there is this guy, Wes, and talking about having the right team. Wes was a manager at a cafe on the Davidson College campus and one of our smartest employees. And I looked around the staff and was you're the best person to figure out how to run a drive-through in 3 days. So can you do this? And he was sure. And here we were.
That's just incredible. That's so cool. Yeah, I'm so glad we can actually show a little bit of that because it's an incredibly kind of visual thing, right? And you just don't realize how absolutely organic this scenario was until you actually see it. It's really incredible. I mean, even just to see some of the community, the kids in the community kind of in the background,
my kids.
What more could you want? Those are your kids. Okay, great.
One more anecdote from that morning. Again, it was such chaos, and we didn't have any coffee brewing equipment. Our cafe is called 250 yards down the road, and we ran out of coffee. So we opened at 7 a.m. and we brewed 10 gallons of coffee, and we ran out of coffee by about 7:18. And so I was on the phone talking to our cafe. We had someone there just brewing. And so I legitimately took that green 5-gallon carafe that was in the video and sprinted down the sidewalk like to get more coffee. And like all these people were in line waiting for coffee and we had nothing to sell them. And I was just like hauling butt down the street, waiting, trying to go get more coffee.
So, when you kind of took the helm, it was 2011, 2010, you said?
Mm-hmm.
In a million years, would you think that 10 years later, you'd be standing in front of an abandoned bank that you essentially was within your 6-block radius that you weren't even acknowledging on your run every single day? In a million years, could you imagine that you'd be standing there in 2020?
No, absolutely not. And I think, but I knew I wasn't going to, whatever way I was going to lead this company, it wasn't going to be boring. And that's something I've committed to for my employees. That I tell all my employees, I'm never going to let them get too comfortable in their jobs, because I feel like comfort leads to complacency. And so I try to tweak things, not radically, but tweak things often enough, or poke people a little bit enough, just to keep people creating and keep people moving. And so I knew we were going to be doing something. I'm not even sure we're going to be doing 12 months from now.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack there, but I almost want to like really fixate on something that I saw in that video. And again, it was your nonverbals. I mean, here you are, leading this company, running this company. You've got a backwards hat on and some aviators, which I just think is incredible, right? Because that just shows like you basically just got back from this run and you were like, we're setting up shop here. Like I have no time to plan or plot for this. And there was a lot of, we didn't even have the audio on. I haven't seen that clip, but there was a lot of humility in even your stance in that moment. There's a little bit of just kind of like, listen, we're doing everything we possibly can. And I love the term that you just used. Our people are not used to comfort. So of course, I'm going to have somebody step up and say, I can figure out a wireless point of sale system in less than 48 hours. Mm-hmm. Of course, I've got people that are like, absolutely, like I'll make the makeshift sign and I'll deal with, the town regulations and restrictions in terms of parking. And so you have a team that's ready for this, and you have a leader at the front with a backwards hat saying, I don't have all the answers, but I'm here. I'm showing up for my team and for my community. And I think that's incredible.
Well, I appreciate that. And I do think the team thing is I think it's our most valuable asset. I have always hired from the barista level on up for people that are optimistic and curious. I think those are two traits that I always hire for. And I felt like, because I feel like no matter what situation, from a coffee shop, from like a hospitality standpoint, if you have a bad customer interaction, you want someone who's going to take an optimistic and curious, like, let me actually hear your perspective. How can I solve this? And I think that ethos of our company really shined through in March, when it was, gosh, like, I don't know what I'm doing. You don't know what we're doing. We're all smart people. Like, we just need to start doing things. And let's be hopeful that people are going to show up. So it was like, we know our customers well enough. We know our product. Now we just like need to put things together in a way and lean on the right people to, and again, it wasn't like we went out and hired somebody who had experience with the drive-thru. I looked at my team and said, you are quick at adapting systems. You're going to be in charge of the drive-thru. And it was like, I looked at somebody else that was like, you're pretty handy. Why don't you put a sign in the ground? And it was like, everyone jumped in. It was like, okay, what can I do? And you have to, part of being a leader is the combination of knowing who to call at what point for what project. I don't like to micromanage. So I don't want to be like, hey, you go get screws and wood and a sledgehammer and build a sign. I'm like, please figure out how to put a sign in front of this store. And then you call the right person and they're going to figure out the answer. So you got to know your team really well.
Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about, because you had started to talk about how this is a perfect example of, our team doesn't rest in comfort and we have a culture of creativity. And I want to talk about how this past year has maybe even accelerated creativity, or potentially challenged you to let go of some of your planning, your prospective planning. But I almost want to go back to, again, like you at the starting point of building this company. What was your thought process as you added new lines of business. You started with the shops. I believe it was then the wholesale, and then it was the lifestyle brand and the franchise, correct? So like, tell us just a little bit about that progression and some of your decision making. And as you look back, are there lessons learned or things that you might do differently?
Yeah, every time you make a transition, there's an inflection point, and in all honesty, you screw up. Like, or at least you do get some things right, but you mess up a lot. And for us, it's constantly the same foundation of why we do this is run through all of this. We want to create something bigger and something remarkable in all aspects that we do, and we want to create more and better opportunities for the people that we interact with. So from the people we buy coffee from in Central America to the people that work for us at Summit to the communities we're in, if we can provide them more joyful experiences, more connectivity, better jobs than they can get elsewhere, I think that is where I find value. And so all of these things have been rooted in that foundation, but with intellectual curiosity. It's like, and that came true in 2020. And to your first question about what has the last year shown us, I think the drive-thru gave us a good example of like, gosh, we can reimagine all the ways that we do business. And I think that has been something we've done with all of our growth points. We should roast our own coffee. We know nothing about roasting coffee, but we know a lot about coffee. We understand our supply chain. Like, let's figure out how to roast coffee. And, it's not that let's go hire somebody who is an expert roaster. It's let's take the right classes and experiment and talk to the right people and just start tinkering with it. And it's that combination of homegrown, but functioning as a startup, which has been this great transition. But the things, and you mentioned planning, I actually hate planning. I like visioning, but I hate having like specific plans because I never hold true to them. And so I know better about myself. And so one of these things is we build out our cafes. I think we realized we were already leaning into franchising, but I think the way that we tapped into our community in 2020 really showcased to us that is something that our brand can do and that we have the know-how to do, which is create a great retail coffee experience for people. And it's something they can't get from other brands. And I think that is really important. And I think also functionally how coffee shops look, we sort of blew that up. It was, we had like this 1,600 square foot that we'd done 3 times. We knew how to build it. And then it was like, well, we can do just as much revenue out of an 80 square foot hut that we don't even use. Like, let's totally rethink what people want. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's been a really important part of this year. I mean, I think the biggest thing I've learned in the last 9 years of running Summit, or last 10 years, I guess it is now, is I made so many mistakes as a leader of people early on. And that's been my steepest learning curve. And I take pride in how much focus I put on that now. But I think that was something I really was unprepared for 9 years ago.
If you would, I'd love for you to share, just some of the, thinking back, some of the lessons that you could have learned a little bit earlier as a people manager. I mean, what were some of those kind of tough lessons that you learned or mistakes that you were making? Because as a people leader myself, I know that the learning curve is still extremely steep, way steeper than I had ever envisioned it, particularly running a business.
I think, and this is pretty common with young leaders, I think 10 years ago, I was pretty sure that I needed to have the answers. And I think that is actually the total opposite of what I have now. I probably know 10 times more now, but I approach things with so much more curiosity and humility, because I think there's so much more to be learned than you already know. And I felt early on when I was coming in and trying to assert myself as a leader, especially because my older brother had hired me, and I felt like I needed to sort of be the smart one or be the one who had the right answers. And it's a terrible way to lead people, especially people that have been working for that company for a long time. Great, I get this fancy new title, and it's not how I want to run a business. And I didn't really know at the time. I'd never taken classes. I was a creative writing major in college. I I'm a people person, but I had zero management experience. And so I learned on the fly, and I feel bad maybe for those first couple of years of employees who were my who are my students, so to speak. But I, I learned how to like tie being a leader with being a person, because I feel like I had the core values. My parents raised me in a way that I really respected, and I just needed to like bring that over here. It's just sort of humanize myself a little bit to be like, hey, like I am in this position, and I can still learn from you, and we can learn from each other. So let's do it together.
It's amazing how, we, even as much as we're aware of it at times, how much we show up differently as a leader than as a human.
Mm-hmm. And I think in 2020, that is like, it is almost stripped away all this stuff. And companies and people and leaders have been totally exposed, which I think is wonderful. I think vulnerability is an amazing trait. And I feel like if you think of the different emotions as currency in marketing, like vulnerability, like skyrocketed last year as companies that were prepared to be vulnerable about, we need your support, here's who we are. But it was authentically part of the brand that we've been building. And so it's much harder to try to be somebody that you're not, like to try to be a leader. Like, you just be yourself. And if you've learned how to be a leader, and you find opportunities to be a outspoken leader, you find opportunities to be a listener leader, I think that's just ultimately, if you're trying to fake it, so to speak, it's going to get exposed at some point.
Yeah. So let's maybe step back into present day, because I'm so interested in kind of where you stand today, and maybe where you're headed, and how that's different than, again, where you stood a year ago, or 10 years ago for that matter. I want to call out something that, in reading about Summit on your website, you talk a lot about, your mission. And I think there's just some really unique verbiage that I'd love for you to tell us a little bit about. And you talk about your mission is to approach work more based on who we want to be rather than on what we want to do. And I think that's such a interesting statement, because in a lot of cases, there are a lot of organizations out there that, quote, want to do great things. Mm-hmm. And you're saying that's not the route we're going. We want to be directed more by who we want to be. So tell us a little bit about that, and how is that maybe showing up today? Because I'm assuming it probably is in times of change and turbulence.
Yeah, again, this goes a little bit back to the idea of plans, and I do like objectives and goals. Like, I'm not totally metrics. I'm sure my CFO is like, what is he talking about? But
he's got the backwards hat on again.
Gotta keep him in line. No, I think that transitions in life, not to be super esoteric, but transitions in life sort of force you to lean into, again, who you are. And if 2020 taught us anything, it sort of stripped us down to, who are you? What is your company? What do you have to fall back on? And I think so many people's goals and plans were blown up in the last year. And I think if you just go into work every day, and you go into every project and trying to be a leader in your community, be a good neighbor, be a good employer, that stuff doesn't change no matter what the outside world changes. And I think we always talk about this metaphor of getting on the bus. Get your employees, get the right people on the bus. And for us, the bus never has a specific destination, because if people get on the bus because of where you're going, when you change directions, people are going to be like, where are you going? And for us, it's people want to be on the bus for what the bus, why the bus exists. And it's hard sometimes to like measure success. I was having a conversation today about trying to objectify the importance of sustainability person in our company. And, but I think there's also a role in, like, we need to be a leader in sustainability. And I don't know today what that looks like, but I believe that that's something we need to do. And I figure along the way, we have enough smart people who I can assign to come up with objective metrics to determine our success at that. But I love what I do, and it's because it's what I believe in, and then we make decisions based on sort of our core values. And one of those you mentioned earlier is to stay curious and humble. And I think reminding people of that all the time is, it's who we want to be, and it's also, I don't want to go on for too long, but it's also aspirational in the forward sense, because I think I'm a leader in training. Summit is a startup in training, and I think we changed our core values. They originally were our company goals, and I changed it from goal to value because I believe those things are something to be lived, not something to be achieved. You can't achieve being curious. Like, it's not like you check it off and be like, cool, I was curious. It was like, am I consistently curious?
Yeah, we're doing a lot of work in the value space, and it's showing up so much these days because when the business models are turned upside down or twisted, and you are standing in that place of, man, our 5-year plan was just absolutely destroyed. Right. What you have left are your values. Mm-hmm. And we actually, and I want to segue into maybe our last topic, the franchise game, because I want to hear a little bit more about that and kind of what you're thinking from a business perspective. Last week, we had on the show Ryan Zink, who is the CEO of Franchise Fastlane. It's a really emerging and fascinating franchise consultancy. Mm-hmm. He is just so passionate about the franchise model and the impact that it has on entrepreneurs and community alike. We talked a lot about values, and we shared this kind of fun definition of values, and it's actually from Elvis Presley. Okay. And he says that values are like fingerprints. Everybody has them. They're extremely unique, and we leave them everywhere. Mm. And I just, I think that's so provocative in that, we always see values as, words on your website or, signs on the wall. But at the end of the day, we all have them, and it's in every interaction, and particularly for a service industry or a client services industry. I mean, values are all over the place. So I commend you for prioritizing those and being such a value-based team. I want to talk about the franchise model. So tell us a little bit about that, even just from a business perspective, like what really excites you about the franchise model and the then expansion of Summit with it?
So 3 things I will say. One is I think we create a really good retail experience, from our design of our cafes to our coffee menu, to our site selection. I think we're good at that. And so wanted to lean into that. 2 is our supply chain. So one of our sort of the biggest aspect of our business is we import, roast, and ship coffee. And the good thing about franchising a coffee is you get your largest cost of goods from yourself. And so whereas some other franchise concepts don't have that luxury. If you're a juice bar, you're not also growing all the fruit or sourcing all the fruit. And I think that's something that we, from a business perspective, for every dollar that the franchisor makes in a traditional franchise concept from royalty fees, we make an additional $2 on sales of coffee and tea products to those franchise cafes. And so those first 2. And the third is, I really believe in the power of local ownership. I had to get over the stigma of franchising for a while because we've had interest from people, but I've so meticulously grown this Summit brand and messed up and fixed things and succeeded. But ultimately, one thing that I realized was that in times of success and times of flow, it came back to like our ability to be great local owners. And I want to empower other people to bring that Summit brand into their community. If I want to have 50 stores, I can't be an effective owner of 50 stores. Some people can't. Some people, Howard Schultz with Starbucks, I admire him to the nth degree. He's done a remarkable job. Yeah. It's a different business concept. He's a different person. And I think we can empower people to do the drive-throughs in their markets. I can't do a drive-through in a market where I don't live, where it's not in my 6-block radius. And so I think those 3 things are the metrics we're looking at. We're like, this is a home run. Once we get over the stigma of this, like we can design good cafes, we can control and monetize the supply chain, and we can empower our brand to be effective in local markets. It's sort of it's a home run for us.
And if you can bring in, franchisees who share the same values, right? And
Yes.
who, again, kind of live your mission of more who you want to be, and as opposed to kind of what you want to do. I mean, there's real scalability in that. And when we talked to Ryan last week, I mean, I very quickly realized that if you get the right people, they've got such a stake in your brand in a way that, you chopped up over 50 locations just can't do,
Correct.
And so I just think there's such an incredible kind of multiplicative effect, particularly for local brands like yours.
Yeah.
Because it's just, there's real strength in finding folks who share that same passion and also know where you came from. And I wish you luck with that venture. That sounds super exciting.
Thanks. Yeah, we're having tremendous success in spite of COVID, and perhaps even because of COVID. And in some ways, it's shifted people's perspectives on what they want to do with their lives. But I think that we are ready to be a local coffee shop in a bunch of different local areas. And I think that's where you differ from, a national chain. Is if somebody goes to a coffee in Palm Springs, California, and they've never heard of us before, and they have the perception that that's the only Summit coffee in the world, then that doesn't bother me. I'm trying to build a brand, but for those people, that's a win for me.
Yeah, super interesting. This is a bit of a question out of left field, but I love asking it. Brian, what are you geeking out about today? Even just personally, like, is it like a show or some takeout food, or like what's just like totally exciting you these days, maybe with you and your family?
There's a couple things. One, trail running. I'm a huge runner, but I've somehow have never I run at 5 a.m. every day, but I have never owned a headlamp until 2 weeks ago. And now I've discovered trail running before sunrise, and it is like the ultimate thrill for me. I get into the woods and it's me and my headlamp, and I just go, and it's thrilling. And the second is,
you've like officially made it as a trail runner now, right? You've got the headlamp.
Well, I've always been a trail runner during the day, and then I always run at 5 a.m., but those things never aligned. And now it's like the simplest $25 tool was the key to my success. And the show that I love, and I know everyone loves the show, but Ted Lasso on Apple Plus is one of my favorite show I've watched in the pandemic. And it's just funny and so raw, but like just good. It has such a good nature to it. And it's like the perfect thing to watch with my wife at the end of the day. It's like, this just feels good.
Yes. Yeah, there's been a couple shows like that. And it's almost like they have, and Ted Lasso is one of them. It has nothing to do with today's current events. And I think that's why we all love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful. The time went super quickly. So I'll wrap up with just a couple of things. First, Brian, we want to thank you for joining, for your perspective, for your leadership, and mainly for shining a light on your community. We're just realizing how unique all of our communities are, and how different, one 6-block radius can be from the next. And I absolutely love that we were able to share, just a small slice of what you're doing locally with the bank drive-through. I think that's such an incredible story that I hope for years and years you look back on just as an incredible memory, at least, and at most, maybe, a complete inflection for your company in terms of creativity and innovation. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for your creative confidence, again, for stepping into this discussion and for everything that you're doing out in the community. And we're so thrilled to have you a part of the Navigating Now community. As we always say, we would love to have you back.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. This has been wonderful. I always love to share the Summit story. And I think it's really cool what you're doing and trying to put a voice and a microphone to people who are doing important things. So I appreciate you guys taking the time to do this.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And for all of you who have joined, again, thank you so much for joining us. Every week, we go live at 3:00 Central Standard Time. You can register for our talks to attend them live at thoughtium.com/live. And we will share that we've got another great leader at the table next week, Christina Glickman. She is an author, she's an entrepreneur, and she's just an incredible ball of spirit and energy and confidence. And she's going to be talking about how we step into unapologetic confidence. It's the center point of her book and her brand. And we're just thrilled to have Christina at the table. So Again, Brian, thank you so much for your time and for your perspective. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and we hope you have a good rest of the week. So long.
Thanks, everybody.